All are science students and you all know what is biology as well as chemistry. But what is biochemistry and why is there a need to study this branch of chemistry? There are about 119 elements on this earth. Every stuff is made up of mainly carbon and hydrogen. But what about the inorganic elements? Do they also have some role to play in the body and in the makeup of living organisms? The answer is yes, they do, and a very important role. Their absence or even their deficiency can cause some very serious malfunctioning and even death of the organism. As we understand the biological system more and more, we come to know the importance of the metal ions. And bioinorganic chemistry is that branch of chemistry which highlights the role of inorganic elements in the biological system. And in this episode, we will be studying the inorganic elements essential for living organisms and their role in the biological systems. So, the lecture plan of my today's lecture goes this way. First of all, we will be introducing the bioinorganic chemistry. Then we will take up the essential and the trace elements, their classification and the criteria which decides whether a particular element is essential or not, the dose response curve and roles of the trace elements, and in the end we will be discussing the essential trace elements which include iron, zinc, copper in detail. Also we will be discussing some ultra trace elements like cobalt, chromium, manganese, molybdenum, fluorine, iodine, selenium, nickel, phosphorus and chlorine. So, to start with, first of all let us introduce what is bioinorganic chemistry. Bioinorganic chemistry is the branch of chemistry that correlates the inorganic materials with biological processes, or in other words we can say that bioinorganic chemistry is at the gateway of the inorganic chemistry and biochemistry. That is, it describes the mutual relationship between these two subdisciplines with focus upon the function of inorganic substances in living systems, including the transport, speciation and eventually mineralization of inorganic materials and their use in medicinal therapy and diagnosis. It highlights the role of metal ions in biology. These ions are present in specific parts of the biomolecules and are responsible for initiating or inhibiting reactions in biological systems. Essential elements. What is an essential element? Essential element is required for the maintenance of life and its absence results in death or malfunctioning of the organism. There are 30 elements which are essential for life processes in plants and animals. And the trace element is one which is required in very small amount, that is in the amount of milligram or microgram. Out of the 30 essential elements, 19 are the trace elements, and out of these 19 trace elements, 12 are the transition metals. The 30 essential elements are classified as under. Bulk element includes carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus and sulfur. These elements are the elements which are present in bulk amount or in large amount in the body and they are required in the makeup of the organism. Then we have macro minerals. Macro, as the name indicates, again the large amount. These include sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium and chlorine. Thereafter we have trace elements which are iron, zinc and copper. These elements are required in very less amount in the body, that is in the amount of milligram and microgram. We also have some ultra trace elements and these ultra trace elements have both metals as well as non-metals. Non-metals include fluorine, iodine, selenium, silicon, arsenic and boron, while metals include manganese, molybdenum, cobalt, chromium, vanadium, nickel, cadmium, tin, lead, lithium. So, we can see that most of the ultra trace elements are the transition metals. What is the criteria for deciding an essential element? A physiological deficiency appears when the element is removed from the diet and the deficiency is relieved by the addition of that element to the diet. This we can say that an element is considered to be essential when its deficiency produces an impairment of function and when restoration of its level cures the impaired function. The second criteria for deciding that whether a particular element is essential or not is that there is some biological function which is associated with the element, and it is quite difficult to define their concentration limits in the system as it varies from system to system. Like we have sodium. Sodium is vital for humans and higher animals, but it is not essential for bacteria. Some essential elements prove to be toxic, even fatal, when taken in higher concentration. Every essential element follows a dose response curve. This is basically a plot between the essential element dosage and its response, and this type of plot is obtained. In the dose response curve, we see that at lowest dosage organism does not survive. In the deficiency region, the organism exists with less than optimal function. Then we have the optimal region, which is the plateau region. This is the dose which is required by the organism, the appropriate dose. If the dose is further increased, the organism reaches in the toxicity level. That means the element now becomes toxic for the organism. And if the dose is further increased, the organism reaches the lethality range. That means the element is now lethal for the organism and the organism would not survive. Trace elements have very important role to play in the biological system, like they are used in the transport of biological small molecules. For example, we have hemoglobin and hemocyanin, which are oxygen transport agent. Hemoglobin is basically a macromolecule which has a porphyrin, and in the center of porphyrin iron is present, and this hemoglobin is used for the oxygen transport in human beings. We also have hemocyanin, which have the same function of oxygen transport, but here the metal copper is present in the center of the porphyrin rather than the iron. These porphyrins we will be discussing in my next episode. We also have oxygen storage agents like myoglobin. Myoglobin is basically used to store the oxygen in the body, and in this also iron is present in the center of the porphyrin. The second role of the trace element is the activation of the molecules. We have some metalloenzymes in the body. These are the enzymes which are activated by the metal ions, and their function is to catalyze the redox process. Redox process is basically the process where biologically oxidation and reduction of the substrate takes place simultaneously, and in redox process catalysis the element required are iron, copper, manganese, cobalt, molybdenum and nickel. We also have catalysis of acid base processes. Here the element zinc is required. Another role of the trace element is the secondary conformation of macromolecules. That is, these help in determination of the conformation of enzymes, and also these helps in the determination of conformation of proteins and nucleic acids. These also help in the metabolism of microelements, that is in the uptaking, transport, storage of trace elements. Coming on to the essential trace elements, that is iron, zinc and copper. Essential trace elements are not only required, but these are vital for living beings. That is, if they are absent from the human body or from the organism will not survive. The essential trace elements daily requirement range from 18 microgram to 50 microgram depending on the element. Essential trace elements act as catalytic or structural component of larger molecules in the body and have specific functions, making them indispensable for life and optimum health. Coming on to the essential trace element, iron. Iron is an important trace element which is required for the growth and survival of cells, organisms and fungi. 70% of the total iron in human body is stored in the form of hemoglobin and 3% in the form of myoglobin. Most of the remaining iron is stored as ferritin. The functions of iron are in the transport of oxygen. Like how does iron help in transport of oxygen? Basically, as I have already told, iron is present in hemoglobin, in the center of hemoglobin, and this hemoglobin is basically a oxygen carrier which carries oxygen from lungs to different part of the body, and also it carries the CO2 from different part of the body to the lungs. We have myoglobin, which is oxygen storage agent. Here also iron is present in the center of the porphyrin, and it enables the storage of oxygen in the muscle cells. Iron is also a part of many enzymes and is essential for growth, healing, immune function and synthesis of DNA. The main source of iron are beef, poultry, fish, soybean flour, spinach, beans and fortified cereals. Ferritin is a major iron storage protein in mammals, but it is also found in plant chloroplast. It serves to store iron in a non-toxic form, that is, it deposits it in a safe form and transport it to the areas where it is required. It is distributed mainly in spleen, liver and bone marrow. The iron content of ferritin varies from 0 to 23%. Apoferritin is another protein which is prepared by the reduction of ferric, that is iron 3 plus to ferrous iron 2 plus at a pH of 4.5, followed by removal of ferrous by dialysis. Apoferritin can store iron and then transport it to appropriate site to aid in biosynthesis of other molecules involving this particular metal. This is the reaction pathway of ferric from food stuff to hemoglobin and to ferritin. First of all, the ferric present in the dietary material is reduced to ferrous in the gastrointestinal tract. After absorption into the cell of the intestinal mucosa, this ferrous is incorporated as ferritin. Ferrous in mucosa is also converted to Fe3 positive, that is ferric plasma, which is bound by iron binding globin, that is transferrin. Plasma Fe3 positive in equilibrium with iron in liver, spleen and bone marrow. And also this ferrous, it combines with the porphyrin to form heme, and this heme combines with the protein globin to form hemoglobin. Coming on to the second trace element, which is zinc. Zinc is the second most abundant trace element. It acts in the body mainly as a cofactor for hundreds of diverse zinc dependent enzymes such as DNA polymerase, alkaline phosphatase and carboxypeptidase, etc. Body content of zinc is 2.5 gram and it is distributed as 60% in muscle and 30% in bone, and the remaining 10% is in other body tissues and organs. The function of zinc are as follows. Zinc play an important role in the formation of enzyme. It also plays an important role in collagen synthesis, wound healing, bone metabolism and reproduction. It improves immune function, blood, maintains sense of taste and smell, keeps skin healthy and enable normal growth and development. Its sources includes eggs, seafood, red meat, fortified cereals and whole grains. Daily requirement of zinc is 3 to 14 milligram and it is age and sex dependent. 20 to 30% of the dietary zinc is absorbed mainly by small intestine. Zinc is the constituent of the enzyme carboxypeptidase, which catalyzes the hydrolysis of terminal peptide bond at the carboxy end of the peptide chain. It behaves as a Lewis acid towards many biomolecules in biochemical system, as it is a soft acceptor as compared to other divalent cation. Carboxypeptidase has 300 amino acid residues including 3 methonyl residues. This selective enzyme hydrolyzes the polypeptides in which the terminal amino acid segment has an aromatic or a branch chain aliphatic substituent, which is represented by R double dash in this figure. This is the amino acid sequence, and the enzyme carboxypeptidase, it hydrolyzes it from the end which contains the aliphatic or aromatic branch chain substituent, which is represented by R double dash. Carbonic anhydrase is another enzyme which contains zinc. It is vital for respiration in animals and catalyzes the normal slow carbonic acid and CO2 reaction equilibrium. This particular reaction, CO2 plus water, this gives carbonic acid. This is a very slow reaction and it takes 100 of years to complete this reaction if the particular enzyme is not present. But this enzyme carbonic anhydrase, it fastens this reaction. This is the structure of the enzyme carbonic anhydrase, whose molecular weight is 30 1000. In here the zinc has 4 coordinated environment in which 3 of the ligands are the imidazole nitrogen, like we can see here, this is imidazole, this is also imidazole and this is also imidazole, and the nitrogen from the imidazole is linked to the zinc. The fourth ligand present here is the water, that is the water is the fourth molecule which coordinates with the zinc. Coming on to the third essential trace element, which is copper. It is the third most abundant trace element in the human body. The daily dietary requirement of copper is between 2 to 6 milligram. Typically 40 to 60% of copper is absorbed by duodenum and is transported through metalloenzymes like ascorbic acid oxidase. In plasma, 90% of the copper is bound to a conjugated metalloenzyme which is known as ceruloplasmin. 9% is bound to carrier proteins such as albumin, and only 1% of the copper is free in the form cupric, that is copper 2+. Body content of copper is 80 to 120 milligram. The body functions of copper. Copper is involved in the process of erythropoiesis, that is erythrocyte function, and it regulates erythrocyte survival. Copper is critical for energy production in the cells. It is also involved in nerve conduction, in connective tissues and the cardiovascular system and the immune system. Copper is closely related to estrogen metabolism and is required for women's fertility and to maintain pregnancy. Copper stimulates production of the neurotransmitters, that is epinephrine and norepinephrine and dopamine. It acts as a catalyst for copper containing enzymes such as ceruloplasmin, ascorbic acid, dopamine, beta hydroxylase, cytochrome oxidase and tyrosinase. Excess of copper in human body causes a disease known as Wilson disease. It is an autosomal recessive genetic disorder in which copper accumulates in tissues. The main site of copper accumulation are the liver and the brain. This manifests as neurological or psychiatric symptoms and liver disease. How can this disease be treated? Patients suffering from this disease are treated with controlled doses of EDTA, which forms a water soluble complex with cupric, that is copper 2+, which gets excreted through urine. The sources of copper are red meat, coca, shellfish, water pumped through copper pipes and chocolates. Next element, which is ultra trace element, is cobalt. Cobalt is essential trace element for many organisms including mammals. It activates a number of enzymes. It is a constituent of vitamin B12, which is called cobalamin, and is required for the formation of hemoglobin in vivo. Essential for maturation of red blood corpuscles and normal function of all cells. Next element is chromium, which is also an ultra trace element. Chromium is an important trace element that is necessary for normal functioning of insulin, which is a hormone that maintains blood sugar levels. It is also essential for metabolism of carbohydrates, proteins and fats. Chromium is involved in glucose metabolism and diabetes. Chromium 3+ and insulin both maintain the correct level of glucose in blood. In +6 oxidation state, chromium is carcinogenic, that is, it causes cancer when it is present in +6 oxidation state in the body. The sources of chromium are liver, processed meat, beaver's yeast, whole grains, cheese and nuts. Another ultra trace element is molybdenum. It is also an essential trace element for all organisms except the green algae. It is a constituent of several enzymes used by nature for nitrogen fixation and nitrate reduction. Molybdenum helps to activate some enzymes and enables normal cell function. It is moderately toxic and its source include milk, legumes, whole grain breads and nuts. Next is manganese. Manganese is an important element in the formation of enzyme and is also necessary for their activation. It works as an antioxidant, helps develop bones and heals wound by increasing collagen production. It is a cofactor in enzyme functions. Its source are pineapple, nuts, whole grains and beans. Fluorine. Fluorine is also an important trace element and it is used in the formation of bones and teeth. Fluoride hardens tooth enamel, reduces tooth decay and prevent bone loss. Is present in body as calcium fluoride and its sources are fluoridated water, saltwater fish, tea and coffee. Next element is iodine. Iodine is critical for the formation of thyroid hormone, that is T3, which is triiodothyronine, and T for thyroxine. It also helps prevent goiter. It is an antioxidant for extrathyroidal organs as mammary and salivary glands and for gastric mucosa and immune system, that is thymus. Inadequate production of thyroid hormone can cause enlargement of the thyroid gland, which is present in the neck of human beings, and this particular disorder is known as goiter, while its deficiency during pregnancy can cause irreversible brain damage in the newborns. Its sources include iodized salt, seafood, eggs and milk. Selenium is another ultra trace element. It is essential for mammals and some higher plants. It is an integral component of glutathione peroxidase, which is intracellular antioxidant. It protects biological system against free radical oxidants and stress as it is a scavenger of peroxides. Selenium is also an essential element for immune function. There are some proteins in the body which are called selenoproteins, and these proteins catalyze oxidoreduction reactions. Its deficiency in human causes degenerative condition of heart tissue, which is known as Kishan disease. Its minimum dietary intake is 70 milligram, and the sources of selenium are seafoods, meat and onion families, that is the vegetable which belong to onion families. Next essential trace element is nickel. It is a component of several hydrogenases and plant urases. It is highly toxic to most plants and moderately toxic to mammals. If present in higher concentration in biological system, it can cause cancer. Phosphorus, which is another element, is a component of bones, cells and used in the energy production of DNA and ATP as phosphate. In biological context, usually it is seen as phosphates. Its sources are red meat, dairy food, fish, poultry, bread, rice and oats. Chlorine, which is also an ultra trace element, is needed for the production of hydrochloric acid in the stomach. This hydrochloric acid is basically used for the digestion of the food, and it is also required in the cellular pump function. Its source is table salt, that is the normal salt we take in our food. It contains chlorine in the form of NaCl. Coming on to the summary of my today's talk. In this episode, we have studied the meaning of bioinorganic chemistry, how the inorganic elements are related to the biological system. We have also seen what are essential and trace elements and their classification. We have also studied the criteria for an essential element, that is, a physiological deficiency appears when the element is removed from the diet and the deficiency is relieved by the addition of that element to the diet, and a specific biological function is associated with the element. We have studied the dose response curve, that how the amount of dose of an element affect any biological system. The role of trace elements was also studied, and in the end essential trace element, that is iron, zinc, copper, was studied in detail along with ultra trace elements like cobalt, chromium, manganese, molybdenum, etc. In my second episode on bioinorganic chemistry, we will be discussing the alkali and alkaline earth metals, their distribution and biological role in the body, sodium potassium pump, the concentration gradient, role of magnesium ion